Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, January the 15th in the Memorial Arena. I'd like to begin by thanking our volunteer crew who are great and the Shaw staff that makes it all happen. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack Show, so we'll start off. Walter, both you and I were at a meeting last night, Tuesday the 14th, sponsored by Green Party MLA Andrew Weaver, and the forum was about sewage treatment. It was an interesting and kind of a lot of good information put out, I thought. There was a standing room only crowd at the Oak Bay Rec Center. About 180 people turned out, something like that. To me, we've had Richard Atwell, who was one of the speakers on our show a few times. There was another speaker who talked about different kinds of treatment facilities that can be used that will do a better job than what is being planned for us now by the CRD and will cost, it seemed like, less than half the price. And these units are in operation around the world, and he said they can basically be bought off the shelf. You just buy them and you install them. They're small. There'd have to be, I don't know how many around the city, but the total cost would be less than half, he was saying. Now, is he right? I don't know. But since Andrew Weaver was sponsoring the event, I'm assuming that Andrew Weaver thought this information was correct. It sounded good, and I'm just not sure why this has never been looked into by our local politicians who are pushing the current sewage treatment plan, which seems to be an overly expensive, environmentally almost useless disaster.
Well, it's a quagmire of information, and the views are so radically different. That's pretty well all the public needs to know to get more involved. The critics are saying that, some of their costs are saying it's 35% of the CRD's proposal, and they're treating the sewage at a tertiary level, of even a higher level. So, just with that analysis alone, and with those numbers being so wildly different, the public should really be concerned.
Jeff Young was at the meeting. Jeff Young is a Victoria City Councillor. He has been the chairman for several years of the CRD, although he's not right now. But right now he is the chair of the committee that's most involved with this sewage treatment. So he's in a fairly powerful position, and he's been around a long time. He spoke in opposition to the person who said we can do a better job at less than half the price. Jeff Young stood up and said he's spoken to the CRD engineers and they simply don't agree with that point of view. And I've been dealing with senior, in a very small way, with senior city staff and senior CRD staff for the last 20 years. Usually I'm opposing the kinds of things that they're trying to do. And one thing I learned very, very quickly was that you can't trust them to be necessarily giving you correct information. I have seen senior staff mislead the people of this city into directions that I don't think were in our best interest, but certainly they were not at those times putting out correct information. And for, somebody like, any politician to say, our staff says it doesn't work, and I believe them, it's a little nerve-wracking because the senior staff seem to have their own agenda. It's often an agenda that does not seem to be in the interests of the people of this city. Just within the last few months on this sewage treatment issue, a senior staff member said that to have a distributed sewage treatment system, meaning several or a couple of dozen smaller systems around the city instead of one big one, would cost $2 billion. And yet a simple analysis just of his arithmetic showed he was off by $1 billion. The real, just using his own numbers, it should have been $1 billion, not $2 billion. And, now the chair of the committee that's most involved with this says, our staff says a new idea won't work and we believe them. It's enough to make you very concerned.
Well, people have asked uh, Jeff Young and others to produce, the paperwork that for them, that they come up with the analysis that it was going to be $2 billion. They haven't provided it, nor will they ever provide it. Let's face it, they don't have it. They appear to be making it up as they go. I want to recognize Jeff Young for the courage of going to that meeting and taking that heat. His arguments did sound quite lame to most people there. But there you have a guy that's the chairman of the committee saying that they've looked at this and his engineers don't agree. Well, Jeff Young, write this up in a way that the public can understand it. Give us that information. Let me see how you've made that analysis. And if he's just going to make some kind of an off-the-cuff response like that and not try to support it, his credibility is really going to go down.
From what I know, senior staff have, from the very beginning of this sewage treatment plan, have pushed very hard to keep anything different than their own ideas completely off the table. And it's very worrisome that staff are doing these kinds of things. I mean, I don't know where to go with this except to say it's up to the people of this city. Phone your city councilors, phone the CRD people, phone the media, and demand from all of them that this issue really be put on the front burner, because it's $1 billion we're looking at, and from everything that's being said and done, it doesn't look like there's going to be virtually any environment. It's supposed to be about protecting the environment. There's virtually zero environmental benefit from this. I think really we'd be just as well off to do nothing. And if we're going to have treatment, let's at least build the most effective, best sewage treatment system that we can for less money, which seems doable.
Well, it seemed to me that the panel were calling for 2 or 3 things. And remember, there's November elections coming up, for municipal elections in the whole region. This should be in the election. Candidates should be running, discussing the sewage treatment plant. Now, I think the CRD and staff really want to make some decisions to get us into this project so far that we can't get out of it.
You mean they're going to be signing contracts in the very near future? Yeah.
Now the thing is, there should be a moratorium on all decisions made on this, and let the public have a chance to make a vote on this, and let's just see where the support is, and let's get these new ideas out into the public. Let the public find out. It's very exciting information. I really enjoyed that public forum. I have to give thanks to Andrew Weaver and the panel. They just did a great job of getting that information out to the people that were there. I think when the public finds out that we have alternatives, the alternatives are so much more environmentally sound, so much more ecologically sound. It's just amazing the difference. And as I always said, you sort of have a concept that there's an economic world and there's an environmental world, and there's always a sacrifice with the environment, perhaps, in order to get something done. I don't believe that at all. I believe that if something is economically sound, it's automatically good for the environment. All you have to do is project out far enough into the future. We might save a lot of money in the first 10 years, and then the rest of the lifetime of that, it's going to cost us so much.
You mean if we do the wrong thing?
If you do the wrong thing. So, ecology and economics, really, there is not much of a difference, a separation between those two interests. If it's good for the environment, it'll be economically sound.
You wanted to talk a little bit about light bulbs?
Well, we should mention it again. I know I just talked a little bit with Will just before the show. We did talk about it last week, but...
So the federal government is now phased out. It's almost illegal. Well, it is illegal now to be selling any light bulbs, incandescent, 100 or 75 watts, that were manufactured after the beginning of this year. So they're disappearing from the shelves or already gone.
And we know that the compact fluorescent light is a disaster for the environment. The way they're manufactured, the components within the CFL are very, very hazardous to the environment, particularly the mercury. How these are being disposed is a huge hazard. But if people don't want to talk about the environment and they just want to talk about money, saving money, even without looking at the manufacturing and all that, the actual physical operation of the lamp, it doesn't save any money. If you really look at if you do an analysis of how they work, and look at their inefficiencies within the lamp, which sometimes are 50% of the energy going to the lamp is wasted.
So you're saying if I buy a CFL bulb, which I don't,
Yeah.
I really don't like them. I think they're dangerous. I don't like
Yeah.
the light from them, etc. So I try not to use. I don't use them at home. But you're saying if I buy a bulb, I'm not going to save any money with that
Not
bulb.
really, not over the lifetime of the lamp, because CFLs, when they're through their life cycle, they're only emitting about half the light they used to. So you're not getting the value that you would out of a standard incandescent bulb that glows at full illumination until it burns out. You have to factor these things
Yeah,
in.
of course. Yeah.
I go into homes all the time and take a look at the lighting, and I'm just shuddering at all these CFLs. The place looks like it's so dimly lit, and the light is so shaky. The light quality is so poor, and that has to go into the economic analysis. You're just not getting as much light out of these things as they claim. They're burning out so much faster than what's on the box. It's just, there's just nothing good to be said about them. But the federal government is, in their wisdom, thinking that we are going to not use them in order to save energy. But they themselves do not have a scientific analysis of that. They don't have any real data to give to us other than the claims of the manufacturers.
And let's not forget that the federal government is Stephen Harper. And to have anyone even think for a second that Stephen Harper gives a damn about helping the environment is completely and utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
So the environmental argument is a non-starter from the get-go, because Stephen Harper seems to be out to destroy our environment as quickly as can possibly be done. Noise. I'm always, there was a column in the Times Colonist a couple of weeks ago, and talking about noise, I just want to read a couple of paragraphs from it. To me, noise is an important issue, and it's something we should give a lot more thought to. So this is what it says. This is from the Times Colonist, a column a couple of weeks ago. A growing body of research shows that today's chronic hubbub of traffic, construction, sirens, airplanes, and leaf blowers, etc., is wrecking our health and our productivity. Victoria residents who live in the soundscape of Victoria's Harbour Airport will appreciate a study in which researchers measured how aircraft noise affected learning. Before the Munich-Riem airport in Germany was moved in 1992, nearby students scored lower on memory and reading than students elsewhere. Students living near the airport scored lower than students living elsewhere. After the airport closed, their scores improved. However, the students' counterparts near the new airport at Freising saw their scores decline. Other studies show that students at any school subjected to airport noise suffer academically compared to students at quieter schools. In another study, researchers found children whose bedrooms look out on busy traffic have more emotional and behavioral problems than children who sleep in quiet rooms. Now, none of that surprises me in the least. I believe all of that is not only true, but a huge issue, and it's an issue that is never discussed in our media, because noise is fundamentally important to an industrial society. An industrial society lives on noise. Everything they do causes noise. And the idea that noise is harmful can never be mentioned because they don't want us to know.
Well, and noise, can be mitigated in so many ways, just simply by designing equipment better.
Yeah.
And like I've seen that a lot in a lot of electrical equipment, particularly fans and things of that nature, are really a tenth of the emissions that they used to have for noise. And it's just simply because there's been a demand and the public loves to have equipment inside their house that is quieter. So there's not that we don't have the ability to make all this equipment less noisy. It's just that it's for one reason or another, it's not good. It doesn't pay to do it. That's all.
Yeah, so there's something else that we can do. I mean, I've noticed here in Victoria, all restrictions on noise seem to be disappearing. They're allowing buildings to emit more and more noise. More and more restaurants now their music is projecting out onto the streets, and more apartment buildings are using, I guess, very, very cheap ventilation equipment that, I mean, to live next door to one of those places or even down the block, why should you have to put up with somebody else's noise so the contractor can save, or the developer can save a bit of money? I mean, it's ridiculous. The price we're paying for noise pollution is high, and it's up to all of us again, because there is nobody else, there's just us. It's up to us to do something about it. Blue Bridge review?
Let's talk a little bit about the Blue Bridge.
Okay. I saw a story a couple of days ago. They were praising Victoria City Council for doing some good work for the downtown and, you know, making it more business friendly. And I just want to go briefly over what happened with the Blue Bridge, because that was disastrous for our downtown. And for the whole city. They took what started off as a $10 million repair. This is our city council going back 4 or 5 years, and the staff, for sure the staff played a major role. They took a $10 million repair, turned it into a $90 million new bridge. We hope it's only going to be $90 million. And at the same time, removed the rail bridge that used to bring the E&N line into Victoria. So we should have and could have, for about $60 million, a commuter rail system running from Langford into downtown, many trains a day, bringing thousands of people into the downtown, with maybe express buses at a few points along the track, taking people to the hospital, General Hospital, to UVic, etc. And instead, our own city council removed the rail bridge and precluded all of that. And so now, you know, downtown is having serious problems because people don't go there. And here our own city council took out the bridge that could be bringing rail traffic in daily. I mean, it makes no sense.
Well, it's certainly, I think the businesses in downtown Victoria should be very concerned about this total sort of dependency on automobile traffic, you know. Other than buses going up and down Douglas Street, all the rest is just people getting into town in their cars. And it's becoming harder and harder to go into the city and to do any business or go shopping or anything. It's got to the point where people just don't go because it isn't worth the hassle of the driving and also getting the tickets, the traffic tickets. So, you know, I just don't think that this is good for the economy of the city, not to have this alternative of having some type of a light rail transport system from the other communities to bring people into downtown for the shopping and all that. And of course, so many people have to go to work every morning into that downtown core. Why don't we make it a lot easier for them to get there?
Yeah, you know, it's just something that makes so much sense. And when you look at the history over the last 10 or 15 years, you have to say that the people who run this city simply will not allow rail of any kind to be established. They block it time after time after time, even though it's tremendously popular with the public. The people who run the city and the province and the country will not allow it to happen. Walter, we're down to 2 or 3 minutes. You got any issue you want to?
Well, there's nothing that pressing. I mean, we should report a little bit on what's happening with BC Hydro, of course, with the smart meter thing, just to let people know that just because they make these grand pronouncements about people no longer resisting the smart meter program, our estimates are there's still 100,000 people not hooked up to BC Hydro smart meters. There's a lawsuit still ongoing. There are lots of papers being filed through the claim of right process that appear to be very effective so far. Hydro has not charged the extra fees to those people. Just to let everybody know that the battle's still ongoing. there. In many ways, it's just started because now Hydro has to make some serious decisions on how they're going to force people to pay these extra fees, which really are sort of an extortion fee where people just couldn't afford the $35 a month extra on their hydro
It's
bills.
a lot of money.
On top of the exorbitant bills that they're getting now because of who knows what reasons. Bills seem to be doubling all the time these days, and they have to pay for all those run-of-river projects and all that. So that file is still ongoing. There's lots to be reported on the future on that, and people that haven't got a smart meter, hang on to your old analog meters. There's more to come there.
There was a headline in the Times Colonist. This was on Saturday, January the 11th. I'll just show it for a second. It says, "City wants your say on changing downtown." So the City of Victoria has big plans for changing downtown. And I'll say this, the City of Victoria does not want your say on changing downtown. They have an agenda that's the agenda of the developers and the business community and the corporations, and they're going to carry out that agenda. They do not want your say. And for the Times Colonist to run a headline that says, "City wants your say on changing downtown," I mean, they're giving us, I mean, why would the Times Colonist say that? You know, it's, they don't want ours. And they're going to hold an open house. I mean, an open house is the least democratic form of informing people because they control every second of it. We need better from our media. We need better from our politicians. We need better from ourselves.
I agree, and I think the developers are having a lot more say than the businesses downtown. I think a lot of businesses are really taking a whipping from some of these policies that the city is promoting.
They want to turn us into Vancouver, and look what they did there. Walter, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to segment 2 of Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, January the 15th. I'd just like to start by thanking people who have sent us an email. The response has been always either positive or with some good questions and comments. Nothing too much that's been negative, which is nice. So if you can keep that coming, it's great. Our guest in this segment is Brian Gordon. And we're going to be talking about what I think is one of the most important issues in the world, which is climate change. Brian, you've been involved with that issue for a long time. You ran for the Green Party a few elections ago, focusing on climate change. So what's going on?
Okay. Well, that's how I met you, of course, and Rick had the radio show at UVic at the time, and I met you guys as I got involved in climate change. I used to be a climate denier. Really, I didn't believe it was happening, or if it was, the market somehow would fix it. I hadn't really thought deeply about it. But I decided I owed it to my kids to look into it. It seemed like a potentially serious issue. And so on the one side, I found all these guys who really didn't have the credentials to be talking about climate change, really should not have been talking about, economists and statisticians, for example, a mining stock promoter. That's one of Rex Murphy's heroes. Climate denier heroes is a mining stock promoter. That's who he gets his climate change info from. So once I realized that was the caliber of the people on one side, and on the other side, we had all of the scientists in the world, pretty much, including highly respected scientists here in Victoria. I decided I had to do something. So I did. I got trained by Al Gore. I went out and did the Inconvenient Truth presentations. I decided the Green Party was the best hope at the time to get that message out there also, climate change. But over time, I think like many people have campaigned for many things, climate change being one of them, social justice issues, for example, many different things. I got a little burned out because I was not really making progress. And so I took a break from that and came to the conclusion that the environmental movement has failed in the sense that the environment is in worse shape now than it was 40 years ago. So we have to rethink things. And I've since then detached myself from politics. I'm not affiliated with any political party at all, because I decided that the way to fix the issue, and there are many important issues, is not by the kind of action we've been taking. It's time for change. Time to do something different. It's a definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I decided it was time to stop being crazy.
Okay. So you've moved away from fighting on the climate change issue and on to some. But before we
Sure.
change to something else, let's just have. I mean, I first heard of climate change. It must have been 25 or 30 years ago from a friend of mine. He was a scientist, or is a scientist still. He told me about climate change. We just happened to run into each other on the street, and he told me about this thing, and I thought, oh my God. And I started to look into it too back then. And the first thing I ever remember hearing was that the initial impacts of climate change were going to be more and more extreme weather events. And if you look at what's happening around the world these days, there is absolutely no shortage of extreme weather events. To me, I believed in it from the beginning. And now you can see it.
Yeah.
And it really bothered me at first that I never saw anything about climate change in the media. Literally for 2 decades after I first heard about it, it was never
Jack,
there.
you think Canada is bad. I spent 8 years in the US. I came back to Canada, to Victoria in 2003, and I heard nothing in the United States. It was only when I returned to Canada I started hearing a bit about concerns about climate change and started to look into it. But during my 8 years in the US, nothing, not a word.
So that's the role of the media, the very, very important role of the media to keep this important issue completely hidden as far as they can. So for example, the flooding in Calgary that happened many months ago, and the ice storm in Ontario that happened very recently, somehow the word climate change never gets associated with those things, and it's deliberate. It's deliberate, as far as I'm concerned.
I know I've seen a number of articles where they talk about it, but it's never conclusive, right? The reporter will ask the scientist, is this extreme weather event a result of climate change? And the scientists, of course, being honest, will always say we can never say any individual event is the result of climate change. We can only say that the frequency of such events, we think, is going to increase, or the severity of them will increase. So what used to be the 100-year flood or the 100-year storm might start coming every 20 years or every 10 years now. So,
and that's what's happening.
Yeah, that is what's happening. I know that a keen interest of yours is honesty in the media, and you believe we don't have enough, and I don't think we really do either. If you look at some of the foreign papers, like The Guardian, for example, or Der Spiegel in Germany, they talk about climate change on a regular basis. And somebody asked, I think it was the BBC, why aren't you presenting both sides of the climate change debate? And the BBC said, well, we looked into it, and there is no debate. On the one side, you've got actual real scientists with real evidence, and on the other side, you have these flaky people, many of whom are paid by fossil fuel companies one way or another. So we're not going to give their opinion equal weight as we would give a real scientist. So I think the media in some of these other countries is more honest.
I will also say that I know a lot of people who I think are intelligent, well-meaning, and good people who are also don't believe in climate change.
Oh,
so there's that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I like to think of myself as intelligent, well-meaning. We probably all do.
Yeah.
And I didn't believe in it at all. But once you look into it, I think you really, if you're an honest person, you can only come to one conclusion.
But they're also honest people, and they come to a different conclusion. So that's
yeah, I
the
think
way
they
it
haven't
is.
looked into it. I mean, I guess that's the excuse I give them, because I was the same. I just hadn't really given it any deep thought, so I let them off the hook that way.
So
Frustrating as it may be.
you said you want to go at it in a
Right. Okay. So in a new and hopefully more effective way, and I think that, pick the issue that you're interested in, or you're interested in, right? It could be climate change. It's obviously a big one. It could be pick any number of social justice issues. Pick homelessness. Pick anything that really you think is a serious issue in our country or our province or our city, and you look at certain other countries and they don't have those problems, or not to the same degree. And so you have to wonder why. And that's what I started doing. Why would a country like Germany, for example, doesn't appear to have the homeless problem that we do? Despite the fact that West Germany had to absorb East Germany after the wall came down, which was a massively poor country. It was way behind the times. Despite you would have thought half those people would have ended up homeless. That would have happened in the US if the US had taken over some large chunk of land with people on it who were impoverished. They'd probably still be dirt poor. But Germany has brought all those people up, and yet they don't seem to have homeless people. And they're also leading the way. They're completely phasing out nuclear. Whatever side of the nuclear fence you sit on, they've decided they don't want it. They're phasing it out. Same with solar. Well, not phasing out solar. They've gone all in on solar. So you look at these issues, and their media, for example, I find the German media, Der Spiegel and so on, to be more honest and forthright. I'm sure they're not perfect, but compared to CNN or MSNBC or, God forbid, Fox, they're just light years ahead. And what they have in common, I think, with us is a somewhat common culture. Those countries, the Northern European countries, I would call them, and proportional representation. So what you have people have the ability to get their voice heard. So one of the big stumbling blocks for the Green Party is that not that many people want them to form the government. Obviously, they don't get enough votes to do it, but they would love the Greens to have a voice. And if you think back to the days of the Reform Party, if they had been given a voice, they probably never would have turned into the Conservative Party, because they would have been heard and there would have been action taken, and they had some legitimate complaints, those guys, right? They wanted electoral reform in a big way. I suspect they're disappointed in what Mr. Harper has delivered. He took a few good steps and then went in reverse, I think. But if they had had a voice, which they would have under proportional representation, that stuff would have got solved. And I think we would be where Stephen Harper, the last place he wants to be, which is a Northern European welfare state. But those economies are doing well. Yeah. They're doing very well. Norway's got, I think it's $100 billion in the bank. It's an enormous sum of money for a tiny country. Germany is doing, their economy has been quite strong all through the recession even. They were hit.
Now there are proportional representation countries like Italy and Greece which have collapsed, but I mean, the way I look at it, those countries have come under a corporate attack. Their economies are in trouble quite deliberately. They are being attacked because I think the corporations don't like the fact that people don't have to work that hard. People have good social programs, and the corporations have said, we're going to get rid of that. And they've attacked them economically, and they really are paying a heavy price there. But
yeah, they're big. I don't think proportional representation is a magic bullet by any means. I think there has to be the culture that goes with it. I think the culture in those countries is different. In the Southern European countries, the Latin countries included, is different from our culture. I can say this because my wife is Colombian and my whole family is Latin, so I can say this without being hopefully coming across as racist. But somebody said that the difference between the Northern European, say the German culture, and say the Spanish culture or Italian culture, is the German culture and Norwegian culture, they're more individualistic, and so they need to rely on the community as a whole if they fall on hard times. Latin countries are very family oriented, so they rely on their family. They don't rely on the government. So when the government comes along and says, hey, do you want some money? They say, sure, of course, I'll take that for my family, without necessarily thinking, is this damaging to the country? Am I going to overload the country? So it's a completely different mindset, and I've heard that there will be a seismic shift at some point where those countries say, we don't want to work as hard as the Germans work. We just don't want to. It's not that they're lazy, it's just that they value family much higher than they value work.
Yeah. And for many, 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 many decades, those countries and those people have been able to work less and have good societies, but now it's like the corporations have created an economy where if you're not busting your ass 24 hours a day, you can't make ends meet. It's crazy, but maybe that's slightly
but not
off.
In Germany, right? Not in Germany or Norway. Things are much better there. They get 6 to 8 weeks of vacation, and
so
that
what
sort of
you're
thing.
saying is, on the subject of climate change and on many other issues, changing our voting system to proportional representation is going to move us ahead.
That's right.
And I agree.
That's right. Pick your pain. Pick the thing that really bothers you, and then go take a look at Germany or Norway or Denmark or those other countries. Their economies are strong. They're fiscally responsible. They don't have homelessness. They're taking action on climate change. You name it, they're doing it. So I think that those of us who would like to see Canada remain secure and become more so and move forward, I think we need to band together and say proportional representation is our number one priority. Okay. Even if homelessness is your thing, or drug abuse, or climate change.
I absolutely agree with you.
Because if we do that, that other stuff will get taken care of.
Okay, so here we are, it's January of the year 2014. We don't have proportional representation anywhere.
We do not.
Do any of the political parties support it, and how can we move ahead?
Well, they do. The one's not in power.
Yeah.
Harper at one time supported it himself, I believe. He's on record as saying that back when he was head of the Reform back in the day? No, it was, but he's on record of this. Maybe it's Canadian Citizens Coalition, but anyway, National Citizens Coalition. But he said that we should have some form of proportional representation. But once in power, of course, the system worked for him.
Yeah.
Now he's somewhat reluctant to do it. So the NDP supports it. The Greens support it
Federally.
federally.
But when they're in power provincially, like we had an NDP government here from 1991 to 2001, they wouldn't touch
Exactly.
it. So, I mean, it's a big problem because to me, the system we have fails us in so many ways.
It does.
And people don't even know about it because it's never mentioned. It's never an issue. But one quick example, a couple of elections ago, the Reform Party, going back to the Reform Party, got more votes in Quebec than they got in Saskatchewan. You know, but in Saskatchewan they won virtually every seat,
Yeah.
and in Quebec they didn't get one. So people don't get represented.
Yeah.
And it makes it look like Reform was very strong in the West, but not in the East, when that really wasn't the case. They had a lot of support in the East, but it never turned into seats.
And those people are probably saying, we want electoral reform, that's why we're voting for the Reform Party. Come on, folks, let's get some reform. But yeah, I agree. It's not going to happen under our current system. I think that's why I say that those of us who are involved in various causes need to focus our energies on proportional representation, and if necessary, you know, turn out in the streets at some point and say, we want it. It's got to happen.
I think also that more democracy is fundamentally important to moving our country ahead on every issue, as you say. Pick your issue and look at countries that work well under proportional representation, and they seem to be doing better. Because what it does is it gives you coalition governments, so you can't have a Harper who is a dictator and under our system can do anything he wants. In a PR system, proportional representation, he's always going to have to work with others, and
Yeah.
that just blunts his worst.
Yeah,
and
and same
his
with the
worst
NDP. You know,
impacts.
there are a lot of people afraid about the NDP. If they were to gain power, that they would be fiscally irresponsible or whatever the concern is.
Yeah.
But the same thing, right? They would be held in check if they indeed were at risk of that. They would be held in check.
Is there anything people can do besides, you know, getting out into the streets? Are there groups? Are there organizations? Are there places
There
to
are.
go?
And I believe your next guest has all that info
Okay, good.
about proportional representation,
Okay.
about the place to go. He's also heavily involved and in a way has been instrumental in bringing me around to making that my main issue too. Yeah.
Let's go back to climate change just for the
Sure.
last 2 minutes. What can people be doing in their own lives and our own lives to have at least a small impact?
So back when I did the climate change, the inconvenient truth presentation, people would always say at the end, what can we do? And Gore had those 10 things you could do, and they were all pretty small. Change your light bulbs, and you know, the thing is, in the big scheme of things, none of that makes any difference whatsoever if China continues to industrialize, and the rest of the world is essentially ignoring. Like your individual efforts, I think, need to switch from changing light bulbs and changing driving patterns to making proportional representation happen, and then we'll get the action on climate change. But you know, I'm not to poo-poo people's efforts, not to minimize the efforts to save. I mean, I took the bus here, right? I didn't have to. I had a
Exactly.
car, but I took the bus, and I do that on a regular basis. But the fact
But-
is, the climate and the environment is still getting worse,
Yeah.
despite that. So we've got to make some radical change.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what we can have here in Canada, certainly, we should have, you know, at least a fairly high-speed rail system across the country. We should have more rail in all of our cities. Everything should be more
Yeah.
bike-friendly. I mean, all of those things are, you know, bigger than what an individual can do, but will have some impacts. Smaller homes.
Better insulated.
Yeah,
Yeah. Net zero homes.
yeah. The trip to Vegas may have to get canceled.
We'll take the high-speed rail down to Vegas.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. There you go.
Avoid the security hassles.
Okay. Brian Gordon, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Believe
Jack.
it or not, that was 18 minutes.
It flies by.
Okay. And thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum, being filmed again on January the 15th in the beautiful Memorial Arena in downtown Victoria. Our guest in this segment, and he's been on several times before, is Rick Habgood. And Rick, we're going to be carrying on from where we were before, and almost carrying on from the last segment, talking about democracy, proportional representation, voting systems, and the benefits that we as a society can get by changing our voting system. And that's your kind of thing, and I agree with it just about 100%. So where do you want to go?
Well, actually, I listened to Brian Gordon, and really good to hear that he's on the warpath as far as PR goes. And I think he fully understands what we're up against if we continue with first past the post. And probably one of the biggest moments anyways in all this for me was with that German social scientist when he told me that the German electoral system drove the German economy, the German society, and also had a huge influence on the culture. Well, I never actually thought of it in those terms. Like an electoral system is when you elect somebody and then they supposedly represent you and they do things that are beneficial to the society, in our case is Canada. So I didn't actually go too far beyond that. When we were trying to get the STV into place, through the shows on CFUV.
Now, you're talking about a few years ago when we did have a referendum here in British Columbia about changing to a proportional representation system. We had two referendums. The first one, 57% of people voted yes, we want to change. Our premier at the time, Gordon Campbell, said no. 57% loses to 43% because he was opposed to changing our electoral system. The NDP remained completely silent, and the media remained completely silent. And so even though 57% of the people voted for change, we didn't get it.
Yeah.
And then we had a second referendum, and I think less than 50% voted for change in that one.
It's sad, very sad. And it just wasn't promoted well enough. And it also, the forces, the politicians just didn't get behind it.
No, of course not.
Because they're addicted to their power. So you're right. And so consequently, we missed a golden opportunity, no doubt about it. But how does the systems affect our society at large? And that was fascinating to me to even think on that level.
So how does a voting system
Exactly, a
impact
voting
our
system,
society?
electoral system, affect our society at large? How does it do that? So I started looking into the German system, the electoral system, and sure enough, I looked at the Greens, the German Green Party, and I will be talking about the German Greens quite a bit maybe in future shows. But right now, we'll just say that where Germany is today would not be possible without the German Green Party, and the German Green Party wouldn't have been able to do it without the electoral system of Germany.
Right.
It was a marriage of the two, and it was the electoral system of Germany that gave the German Greens the power to be able to go out and very smartly affect change within the German culture.
And we Canadians should keep that in mind, that
Yes.
it doesn't have to be the Green Party, but if we had a proportional representation system, we would get much more, I think, of the governments that we actually vote for. We just don't even get the governments we vote for under the first past the post system.
Well, how can you when your vote doesn't count?
Yeah.
Like when you got, you have four people that from four parties vying for this one seat. One person gets it, and three of those votes, gone, never be seen or heard of again. So how can we? And so how can anybody vote against proportional representation? To me, it's really a no-brainer. You don't want your vote to count? This is what I'm hearing you say? You certainly,
yeah.
I know where you're coming from. So the gateway is one of the hot button issues of our
so
times
the
right
Northern
now.
Gateway pipeline, the
It's
Enbridge
huge.
pipeline.
That's
okay.
right. And the Environmental Review Board of Canada has given the okay.
Yeah.
So why is it that the gateway is moving ahead when so many Canadians are against it? It seems like more Canadians are against it than are for it. So what is it about our democracy that allows something like this to happen? Well, in first past the post, we have elected basically a dictator. And he can basically do whatever he wants to do because we've given him the right to do it. And this is what has to change. Stephen Harper got 166 seats with our first past the post system. If we had had a proportional representation system in place, he would have only gotten 122. Not a majority.
Right.
So consequently, what he would have had to do if he wants to push that pipeline, what he's got to do in a proportional representation system is look towards friends and work with friends to be able to push it through, in which case it would probably be the Liberals. So then he has to work with a coalition. And this is where we fall down. First past the post is an adversarial electoral system. Proportional representation is a coalition system. Like, they're always working together. They have to work together, because if they don't work together, nothing gets done. And they've learned that through generations and through generations and through generations of doing it. So they automatically know, even when they go into election, they automatically know that whatever the results are going to be, they're going to have to make a coalition with another party. And the interesting thing, the way that it works with Germany, is that the Social Democrats almost always take care of all the social issues, and the Conservatives, the CDU,
the Christian Democrats?
CDU, they take care of more of the conservative, the money issues. So they sort of work hand in hand. So they form a coalition, and then they go about and they govern accordingly. Here in Canada, we don't do that. Here in Canada, our politics are strictly confrontational. It's the only thing, it's the only way that we know how to do it. We get in the House of Commons and we scream and we yell and it's abusive. And if anybody was to look at the Parliament and listen to the Parliament and what happens in that Parliament, it's nothing but insult after insult after insult after insult. And it's like whoever can come up with the biggest insult, and then it's whoever can reply to that insult. It's a bunch of kids playing in a sandbox, really, you know. And this is our form of government. Well, that adversarial way of doing things is also extended out into the general public. This is what we see. This is what you get. And that's why you get something like the Gateway, where the only way that we're going to stop it is for people to get on the line and get arrested. 15,000 people have signed up to go on the line.
Oh, really? I didn't
Yeah,
know
already.
that. Really?
In 2 weeks, 15,000 people have said they'll go up and they will stand on the road and they'll get arrested.
And you know what? If they do, they're fighting for the future of all of us.
Exactly. But why should they have to, Jack? The thing
You're
is
absolutely
that
right.
this doesn't happen in a proportional representation, in one that is governed effectively and efficiently, and that is open. That doesn't happen. And the thing is that I think that's what we have to get to. We have to get to where, like an issue like the Gateway, is debated properly with the Greens. The Greens, by the way, under proportional representation in the last election, would have got approximately 22 seats. So you would have a fairly strong Green Party. You would have a fairly strong NDP party. You'd have The Liberals and the Conservatives fairly even, all right, and that's generally how it works. But an issue like the Gateway would be debated, and it would have to be debated in a coalition way. It would have to be debated on a scientific level, not on a personal, name-calling, in-your-face type of confrontation, which happens in Canada all the time. I mean, all you have to look at is some of the really big issues, like GM foods, for example.
Okay.
What happens to GM foods here in Canada, and what happens to it in Europe?
Okay. Well, here in Canada,
Two total different.
here in Canada, this country is one of the leaders in pushing and promoting and growing
Absolutely.
and selling genetically contaminated foods. We're one of the worst in the world.
That's
And I
right.
agree with you. It is in a big measure because we have a first past the post system that does
Yes.
not even give us the governments we vote for.
Absolutely.
And we also have a media that is equally corrupt.
The media is very different also in, like, for example, the media is nowhere near as corrupt as it is here in Canada or in the United States. The media in both our countries they're gone. You know, you
And,
can't believe anything.
Brian mentioned that in
Yeah,
Germany,
Germany
for example,
is so different. And, you know, they just, you know, proportional representation brings about a conciliatory coalition type of environment, atmosphere. So when we're discussing something, we're not looking at it, I'm not looking to beat you. It's not a hockey game. You know, like I'm not looking to beat you. What I'm looking for is for you and I to come to an agreement. And I know right from the get-go that I'm going to have to probably give up a little bit in order to, and you're going to have to give up a little bit if we're on different sides of the border. But the thing is that that's how it works. Because if it doesn't work like that, it doesn't work.
You know, I've done a fair bit of reading on proportional representation, and I think the people who are writing about it, I think, say exactly what you're saying. You use the word dictator about Mr. Harper and
Harper's
all
a-
of our prime
he's a
ministers
dictator.
and all of our premiers.
Yes.
And, you know, the people who write on this issue openly say that what we have in Canada, we have elected dictators. That's exactly what we end up with. And also, it's true that a PR system allows, because what we have with first past the post is you usually have two main parties that are running to get elected, and both of them know if they can move up just a little bit, they're going to form the government and have 100% of the power. Whereas in a PR system, that's not going to happen.
No.
If they move up a little bit, they'll get a couple of extra seats, but they're still going to have to form a coalition
Absolutely.
in order to make the government. So it's not
They
that
know that.
vitally important to get those few extra seats. It just doesn't matter. So, you know, there isn't that tremendous fighting to destroy the other party. Because if you're going to get 80 seats or 85 seats, it doesn't really matter. But in our first past the post system, you're either going to win or you're going to lose, and that is of tremendous importance.
Winner take all.
And as you said, our votes don't count
No.
in a first past the post system. I've stopped voting now, basically, but for many, many years, I mean, if you go out and vote Liberal in a seat where the Conservative or the NDP always win, what's the sense of going out and voting? Your vote is wasted. But in a PR system, your vote is not wasted.
That's right.
And that's important.
That's right.
There's many, many ways that a PR system will benefit us. It's very unfortunate that the media never discusses in any depth and with any intelligence the issue, and the politicians don't either. So the people of Canada remain largely uninformed, as I was until a few years ago when I began to look into it. It's pathetic. And we are becoming a pathetic country because our leadership is making us that way.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we looked at the issue of genetically engineered foods.
Mm-hmm.
In Europe, it's much better, and I think a big part of the reason is specifically because they do have governments that more closely reflect what people want. And people don't want genetically contaminated foods. Here it doesn't matter. And in the United States, it doesn't matter. But in Europe, because they have a PR system over there, they do get governments that reflect more what they want.
Exactly. And you know, that's exactly, precisely what it is. The power is in the people's hands. Exactly where it should be. And in the year 2000, 2001, the social Democrats took power in Germany, and the Green Party, shall I say, also did very well at the polls. I can't exactly remember what they did, but they had about 80 seats. So what the Social Democrats did was they said, okay, well, that's going to put us over the edge as far as power goes. We're going to be able to form a government if we join.
With the Greens.
So the Green Party and the Social Democrats joined together and they formed the government.
Imagine that. Imagine that, a Green
Isn't that
Party literally
unbelievable?
in the government of a major European nation.
And the Greens, through polling, discovered that Germans, by and large, very high percentage, something like 89%, didn't want genetically modified foods grown or in Germany. And if there was any on the foods that they eat, they want it labeled. Well, guess what happened? That particular action of the German Greens in Germany, now everything is labeled, not just in Germany, in all of Europe, including the United Kingdom. So when you read, when you read a food label, you'll be able to read right on it, genetically modified.
And there's a lot less of it sold there than there is here.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Rick,
Anyways,
believe it or not, we're down to less than 1 minute.
I know. We didn't even get to. But anyways, we'll have to do it at other shows.
Okay.
We're going to continue on.
So, it's electoral reform, changing to a proportional representation system is, I think, very important. I hope we can do it. I think a lot of people want it, and it should become once again an important issue of discussion and debate in our country. We have to do it. It's up to us. The politicians won't, the media won't, the corporations won't. Once again, it's up to us. Rick, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck.
And thanks for watching Citizens Forum. Bye-bye.